Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. We're very pleased to be joined today virtually by Rein Paulsen, Director of the Office of Emergencies and Resilience at the Food and Agriculture Organization, and Samer Abdel-Jabbar, the Director of Emergencies for the World Food Programme. And here in this room, to my left, we have with us here Lucia Elmi, the UN Children's Fund's Director of Emergency Programs. And all three will brief you on the latest Integrated Food Security Phase classification update on Sudan, which is looking at the horrendous picture of hunger in that country. We'll first start with Rein Paulsen, then turn to Samer Abdel-Jabbar, and then Lucia Elmi here in this room will talk to you. So first, Mr. Paulsen, can we get him up on the screen, please? Thanks. Okay. Mr. Paulsen, can you hear us?
I don't know if the other connections can be muted. But...
What? Hold on. Hold on. I think we have you on screen now. Please, Mr. Paulsen, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So after 14 months of escalating conflict, the food security and nutrition situation in Sudan has deteriorated significantly. The IPC analysis released in December 2023 had projected already at that stage that between October 23 and February 2024, some 37% of the population would face high levels of acute food insecurity, so what we know as IPC 3 plus. And then in March of this year, 2024, the IPC at the country level, the technical working group, released a further alert based on the latest evidence, expressing major concern at that stage regarding the deteriorating food security situation and advocating for collective action to immediately prevent famine. This latest IPC analysis, which has been released today, was conducted between April and June of this year and involved more than 70 analysts from state and federal line ministries, Central Bureau of Statistics, Ministry of Agriculture, obviously also the United Nations, agencies, NGOs, technical agencies. It covered the current period and gives also projections through to September this year, with a second projection into February 2025. What then are the key findings and the headlines of this analysis? 14 months into the conflict, Sudan is facing the worst levels of acute food insecurity ever recorded by IPC in the country. Over half the population, 25.6 million people, face crisis or worse conditions, IPC 3 or above, from June to September 2024, coinciding with the lean season. And in the same period, some 755,000 people face catastrophe, IPC Phase 5, in 10 states, including the 5 states of Greater Darfur, as well as South and North Kordofan, Blue Nile, Jazirah state, and Khartoum states. Some 8.5 million people, approximately 18% of the population within that group, are classified as being in emergency, IPC Phase 4. And there is a risk of famine in 14 areas, localities and clusters, affecting both residents, internally displaced people and refugees. And those 14 locations are found in Greater Darfur, Greater Kordofan, Jazirah states, and some hotspots in Khartoum. If the conflict escalates further, disrupts mobility, humanitarian assistance, access to markets and livelihood activities. Just to be clear then, these latest findings mark a stark and rapid deterioration of the food security situation compared to the previous IPC update released, as I mentioned, in December 2023. The increase of the number of people in IPC Phase 3 or above is as much as 45% when compared to October, the projections from October 23 to February 2024. And the increase in the number of people in phase 4, what we classify as emergency, has gone up by 47%, some 3.6 million people. And there, of course, very concerningly, has been then a surge in population in the most extreme situation, IPC 5 catastrophe, from 0 in the last analysis to now 775,000 people in the projected period. The key drivers, obviously pervasive conflict and insecurity, have given rise to this complex food crisis that we're facing, has hampered agricultural production, hampered access to markets, basic services, and limited livelihoods. Displaced individuals, I should say, have also largely lost livelihoods, impacting their ability to produce. Let me just say a couple of words quickly before I hand on to other colleagues in terms of FAO's response as part of the multi-agency efforts to prevent famine across the country. We're scaling up actions to support local food production of the most vulnerable households. We're concentrating efforts as FAO on supporting local production of essential cereals such as sorghum and millet, as well as providing emergency livestock assistance, including veterinary services, fishing supplies, all of which are aimed at boosting nutrition of the population then that are acutely food insecure. This current cropping season that's taking place right now in the months of June, July, and into early August is vital for Sudan. We're preparing to support some 1.8 million farming families and pastoral households in the coming months, equivalent to approximately 9 million people in total. We'll help them to restore livelihood activities and to produce food locally. We're already in the process of distributing some 8,000 tons of cereal seeds as part of the response in these areas. Our experience last year, this same time last year, in fact, shows us that when farmers can access lands and have inputs, they will produce food. This same period last year, FAO's rapid scaling up of seed distribution inputs enabled some 1 million farming households to produce enough food to feed well over 5 million people in terms of cereal requirements for the year, even in the midst of fighting and conflict. I'll just finish these early introductory comments by saying that an immediate cessation of hostilities is an essential first step to eliminating the risk of famine. And sustained and safe access, of course, has to be urgently restored to all in need of life-saving assistance. We simply can't let the people of Sudan down, and FAO, together with the other partners you see on the screen here, and others are fully engaged now in those famine prevention efforts. We have to act collectively and at scale. I'll hand with that back to the moderator. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Paulsen. We'll now turn to Samer Abdel-Jabbar, who is the WFP Director of Emergencies, and who is also joining from on screen. If we can please pull up Mr. Abdel-Jabbar. I think I see him.
Thank you, Farhan. And to build on what Rein said on the IPC analysis, since April last year, conflict in Sudan has left millions struggling for survival and devastating violence as families are going hungry and children are at risk of malnutrition and starvation. The new hunger numbers demonstrate the desperation of the situation as the country faces the worst level of food insecurity ever recorded by the IPC in the country. More than half the population is now facing crisis level of hunger, unable to feed themselves and their families, with hunger-related deaths already being recorded. WFP is deeply concerned by these numbers and the unprecedented hunger and malnutrition that is sweeping across the country, especially as the annual lean season approaches, when food stocks run out and hunger peaks. Displacement is rampant. People are fleeing their homes with nothing and nowhere to go. The conflict is putting immense pressure on scarce resources and destabilizing the region, especially in South Sudan and Chad, where the number of refugees have doubled. Millions of people are out of reach in conflict-affected areas where they are not able to access humanitarian assistance due to fighting and insecurity. Additionally, the impending rainy season will make roads impassable, cutting off humanitarian supply routes. Thanks to the effort of our dedicated teams on the ground and partners, In 2024, so far, WFP has assisted over 3 million people, internally displaced, refugees, and vulnerable host communities across Sudan. We are working to expand our operations to reach an additional 5 million people this year. Sudan is one of our top priorities, and it is essential we keep it high on the global agenda. But with the current funding level, WFP and all the other partners don't have the resources to support everyone facing emergency or catastrophic levels of hunger. In addition to funding, we also need unfettered access to communities, safe passage, and freedom of movement for humanitarian convoys. To achieve this, we call for more political and diplomatic engagement with influential stakeholders to ensure humanitarian access is granted and maintained. A ceasefire is the only way that we address the escalating hunger, displacement, and destruction. It is imperative that WFP and all humanitarian actors have the operational space to scale up assistance and tackle the long-term impacts of the conflict. WFP is working around the clock to expand access and open new humanitarian corridors to move food supplies across the country and borders. Ahead of the rainy season, we are pre-positioning food while we still can, particularly in areas of Darfur and Kordofan. In addition to our response within Sudan, we are also aiming to meet the needs of more than 2 million people who have fled the country, mostly to Chad and South Sudan, who are now going hungry in camps near the border as the humanitarian response is at breaking point. We can see the desperation of the people of Sudan growing every day. They are exhausted, they are hungry, they are traumatized. We must respond now, at scale and at speed. And to do this, we need renewed international support to prevent a humanitarian catastrophe. Thank you very much. Back to you, Farhan.
Thank you, Mr. Abdel Jabbar. And now we'll turn to Lucia Elmi, UNICEF's Director of Emergency Programs.
Thank you, and good morning, good afternoon. The widespread food insecurity that my colleagues from FAO and WFP have described has a particular devastating effect on and creates specific and distinctly chilling risk for Sudan's children, boys and girls. Our projection indicates that 3.7 million children will suffer from acute malnutrition this year, with over 730,000 children facing severe acute malnutrition and an imminent risk of death without access to treatment, the highest number in a decade. It is important to understand just how dangerous severe acute malnutrition is. It is life-threatening, making children up to 11 times more likely to die than their well-nourished peers. Even when children survive malnutrition, the effects on their physical and cognitive development can be lifelong and irreversible. However, we also know how to treat those children and save their lives. And in response to the situation, UNICEF, together with partners, is intensifying its effort to prevent further deterioration. We have expanded our nutrition-focused partnership to 152 locations, ensuring an operational presence in 93 priority areas. Through the integrated nutrition intervention in more than 1,700 health facilities and 60 mobile teams, we have admitted more than 100,000 severely malnourished children this year alone. Additionally, we have established 170 new nutritional sites and distributed ready-to-use therapeutic food across the 18 states of Sudan, enough to treat 180,000 children. As of today, snapshot make clear, despite those efforts, significant challenges remain, particularly for children. The war has severely impacted the delivery of humanitarian supplies. Violence and bureaucratic hurdles impede access to conflict-affected areas, leaving countless women and children without vital nutritional support. As we face an ever-increasing risk of conflict-induced famine, the need for a comprehensive and well-funded response is critical. UNICEF, together with the other partners, including FAO and WFP, is currently facing significant funding gap. For UNICEF alone, we have a gap of $120 million to fully implement the famine prevention plan. We count on the renewed support for a significant scale-up from donors, and particularly for the pledges that are already being forward, but there have been delays in coming through. However, funding only gets us so far. It is crucial that all parties to the conflict, indeed all actors, facilitate immediate, unimpeded, and consistent humanitarian access through all possible cross-line and cross-border routes so that children and their community can receive the nutrition, water, medical care, and shelter they desperately need. It is important to note that the lack of access combined with the disruption of telecommunication networks also affect our ability to effectively monitor the situation. It is especially important that we are able to implement food security, data collection, and nutrition data in El Fasher, in Khartoum, and other hotspots that are not accessible and they are at risk of famine, along with scaling up nutrition and mortality surveys and screening in locality where most of the population in IPC 5 is, and systematically record information for children under 5 so that we are able to reach them better. Most importantly, children need peace, an immediate de-escalation of the situation in El Fasher, and a nationwide ceasefire. Without peace, their chances to survival diminish, and the prospect for a brighter future remain a distant dream. It is therefore vital that we all come together as a global community to address this crisis with the urgency and the commitment it demands. The window to alert the worst is rapidly closing, and the lives of Sudan children depend on our collective action. Thank you, Farhad.
Thank you very much, Ms. Elmi. And now I'll turn the floor over for questions. As always, please indicate to whom you're directing your question. First one goes to Edie Lederer.
Thank you all very much on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association for doing this briefing. My name is Edith Lederer from the Associated Press. A question to all three of you. Do you know whether the rival generals who sparked this war have seen or will be getting copies of this report? Because they are the moving parties. And Mr. Jabber, you said that there have been a number of hunger-related deaths. Are there any numbers? And to Ms. Elmi, is there any indication of a time frame for the dire consequences for children? Thank you.
Please, you first.
Yeah, no, thank you. Let me start with the last question. Well, the time frame was yesterday, so the issue is like there's a really sense of urgency. The lean season is starting soon. It will be very difficult to be able to reach certain areas as well. And so it's not a matter of how long we have, but how much more can we have access to them. So it's really the sense of urgency and the feeling that every single day is a tragedy for the largest displacement crisis in the world and the largest also protection crisis in the world for children. So it's really a matter of urgency and every minute counts.
Mr. Paulsen?
Thank you very much. Just to say, as I mentioned at the beginning of the briefing, we've published the findings online as a specialized technical agency. One of our commitments is to make sure that we have, together with our partners, the most up-to-date analysis available, shared. It's a global public good and it's online, and we hope everyone has access to that information.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, in the back?
Thank you all for your briefing. Greg Walton, AFP. This one might be best targeted to Mr. Abdul Jabbar. We saw the Special Rapporteur on the Right to Food describe the SAF and the RSF using access to food as a weapon of war. I wonder if you could qualify to what extent that is affecting the situation on the ground, how much of a toll that is taking, and if you can give any examples of particularly egregious situations along those lines. Thank you.
Mr. Abdul Jabbar?
Thank you very much. And look, more than half of the population, Sudan is a 26 million people, are facing a crisis level of hunger and food insecurity. And 775,000 people are facing catastrophic conditions with hunger-related deaths already being recorded. That is really important for us to keep in mind. And honestly, we need to all come together as an international community, humanitarian community, to make sure that we're putting the right attention to this conflict, to make sure that we are actually able to avert further deterioration of the situation, keeping in mind and in heart and in our focus the people that are affected by this conflict. That's how we are driven by the humanitarian principle.
And
Mr. Jabbar, are there any indication of the numbers of hunger-related deaths?
I don't have a total number there. I think we're going to wait for the official report to be out or the snapshot to be out, and that will give you more details on the exact numbers. But by default, the methodology, if we're talking IPC level 5, that means there is already people affected by the food insecurity and famine. And also the large number of IPC level 4 means that people could, if not supported, go into that catastrophic level, which means that they will be people dead, unfortunately.
thanks. Gabriel?
Hello, my name is Gabriel Elizondo from Al Jazeera English News Channel. Thank you very much for your briefing to all of you. Perhaps for Mr. Abdul Jabbar, the first question, but anyone that might have some information. How was the access, particularly in the Darfur region, in terms of being able to get data? We've seen in Gaza, for example, the access is limited to almost zero for these types of studies. Do you feel that your access was sufficient, or do you feel that the numbers could actually be an undercount given access limitations? And the second question is, how is the border with Chad right now in terms of aid, food aid getting in? Is any getting in through that border crossings or not? And final, for anyone that wants to answer, aside from the facts that you laid out in your presentations, each of you, what did you feel or what did you think when you saw this data for the first time come in?
Please. Why don't you go first?
Yeah, no, thank you. To answer your last question, is a feeling of catastrophic situation of children that we have not seen in over a decade in Sudan, and how this has been unfolding the eyes of the world, and how little attention the crisis in Sudan has had. And we had more traction over the past few weeks. We had our executive director who has just visited Sudan, and it's really a call for action and a call for ceasefire for all children. Children don't start war, and children don't have the power to end wars, but children are the ones who suffer first and the most. So it's really a wake-up call for everyone to act as soon as possible and to get a ceasefire.
And I think for the first question, we turn to Mr. Abdul Jabbar.
Thank you very much. I think on access, it's not just about having one access or a number of trucks across line or cross border. It's to make sure that actually the restoration of safe and unhindered humanitarian access, we need to make sure that it's sustainable. We need to make sure that it's making an impact. We have been collectively able to get some aid across the cross lines and cross border, but I think we need to make sure that it's sustainable, and that is really important. We are able to see some commercial sector actually able to move some commodities, and that's why all the humanitarian partners, including WFP, are actually also using using cash-based operations to actually make sure that we stimulate those markets where it's functioning. But of course, from our side, we're also using in-kind assistance to help us navigate some of those access challenges and do, if you can say, access negotiations. In terms of borders, I think it's pretty different than the comparison with Gaza, in the sense that we're talking about the number of countries. Access from Chad is one, South Sudan from Egypt, and we have an open port in Port Sudan. So we're looking at the utilization of all those different corridors, but also from other countries that could move in. So we've been trying convoys out of Libya into Chad and into Darfur's. That has successfully worked, but not yet to the level. It was a testing attempt that we wanted to see if it's going to be working. This was done 20 years ago as well, and it allowed the scale in response.
And maybe if I could
Mr. Paulsen?
come in as well on one of these. Thank you very much. If I could come in as well on this question around the reactions when we see this data coming in. I think the strongest reaction that I know also my colleagues Samir and Lucia are feeling is, we know what it takes to prevent famine. We have multi-sectoral strategies, nuanced by geographical location, mixes of activities between in-kind assistance and agricultural support and health interventions and nutrition interventions and water and sanitation interventions, planned in detail. We know how to respond. The challenges that we're all having from a funding perspective, from an attention perspective, and some of the access challenges as well are preventing us. And so when you see numbers come in that describe a situation this bad, when we were already talking about a situation that was really concerning with the analysis that was done in December last year, it's this sense of, we need more attention and we need more support, because we do know how to respond to these contexts with the right resourcing.
All right. Thank you. I have one question that was asked by a reporter, Evelyn Leopold, via text, and she asks, are there cartels operating in the conflict areas that keep food prices high? Does any of you want to handle that one?
I'm happy to just cover this. I think what's really important is to make sure that the affected population are able to receive the aid. And usually when crisis happens, the scarcity of commodities in the market could lead into some issues that could affect the stability and stabilization of the markets. Exactly one of the issues, like you said. And for us, that's why it's important to make sure that we are getting in aid, but also at the same time enabling the commercial sector where possible to be restored, so that actually it can push the markets to stabilize and to make sure that there is goods that people could buy, or also humanitarian assistance that those that are mostly in need for it get it for free.
Thank you. Okay, I see no other questions, so with that, I'd like once more to thank our guests, Rein Paulsen, the Director of FAO's Office of Emergencies and Resilience, Samer Abdel-Jaber, WFP's Director of Emergencies, and Lucia Elmi, UNICEF's Director of Emergency Programs. So thank you all very much for your briefing. And for you in this room, please stick around. Stéphane Dujarric will be here with the noon briefing in just a minute.
Thank you.